Hey guys, my name is Neil and welcome to NEEL Workshop Zone. So in this episode we're going to be talking about list. So in the previous episodes we kind of talked about control statements and how they work, and from this episode we're going to be talking about list. So yeah, so list is basically a set of elements in a single code. So for example, if you guys heard about array, which is something basically like this, where you can store multiple values, This was an array. And array and list are basically a little bit similar, but there is a major difference between them. So list basically stores elements inside it. So for example, you can write something like 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D, or A, B, C, or and hashtag, exclamation mark, etc. Like that. So now you might be asking, so if list and array are the same, where it can store multiple elements, then what is the difference between both of them? Well, the difference between both of them is that in arrays, you can only store one type of element. So for example, if you are making an array, you can only write 1, 2, 3, 4. Now since all of these are numbers, this is an array. But if you write something like 1A, exclamation mark, 6, this is not an array, this is a list. So that is basically the difference between array and a list. So that is basically how list works. Now there are three other things that are kind of similar to list, which we'll talk about in the future episodes. But let's talk about some of the minor difference between them, or one of the major difference between them. So in all of those in all of those differences between all these three types of things that are similar to list, the three are list, which I'm talking about. You have tuple and you have dictionary. So we'll talk about these three in our next episode. But for now, one of these minor differences is when you're making code, or you're writing in the single line of code, you basically write square, but sometimes you just mistakenly write it as circles or curly brackets, etc. Now that is the difference between all three of these. This is not the only difference between the three of them. There are still major differences, but this is one of the differences between them. In list, when you're writing elements, in the brackets, you can only use the square brackets. Meanwhile, in tuple you can use curly brackets, and in dictionary you can use curved brackets. So that is basically one of the major differences between list, tuple, and dictionary. And all three of them almost perform the same function of storing multiple elements in all of them. But that is basically list, dictionary, and tuple. Now let's talk about two other things that are really important. First, let's talk about input. So if you guys don't know what input is basically scanner. So if any of you have watched my previous Java videos, or just know a little bit about Java and know about scanner, you kind of understand what input is. But basically input is giving decisions to the program at runtime. So for example, imagine you're making a simple code. Like for example, let's just say A is equals to 1, and print if some number is greater than A, print is greater. Now imagine the number that you want to print. You don't want it to be pre-saved, like you don't want to just give its value. Like it must be something that you can just, the computer can ask while it's doing the process, and it'll just give it as part of the process. So what input does is basically when you type in the code, something like input dot something like that. And when you add input to the code, imagine the same thing, but let's take you use the input code in it. Then what happens to the code is essentially when you print it, it asks something like what is the number. So it'll probably ask after you click enter, it'll just ask what is the number. So imagine during that time you just type some random number like 7, and then it compares 7 to this value and checks if it's correct or not and prints it. So scanner is basically giving the giving the instruction during the runtime process itself. So that is basically how input or basically how input or scanner works. So that's basically what we're going to be talking about in this episode. So we'll be talking about more of this in next episode. So in this episode I will talk about the introduction of this. It's kind of just like the concept of how them work. These are basically going to be storing multiple set of elements in a single line of code. So we're going to be talking about this in the next couple of videos. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out any new videos. And that's all folks, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.